We're so glad that you decided to tune into the Church Rehab podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Kennedy Enterprises. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the podcast so you can be notified each time a new episode drops. Enjoy the podcast with our host, Pastor Michelle Kennedy of Embrace You Ministries. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Church Rehab. I am Master Life Coach Michelle Kennedy, your host, and this podcast has been powered by Kennedy Enterprises. We want to thank you for tuning in for another episode. Our podcast airs every first and third Friday at 8 o'clock p.m. on all major podcast directories. And then if you want to watch the video from the podcast, you can catch that on first and third Saturday mornings at 10:30 a.m. So we have been doing our podcast, and we've been having some very candid conversation with some preacher kids. As a preacher kid myself, we have a different experience in church that a lot of people have. So we are kind of shifting, and now we're going to talk about the pastor's experience. If you are not a pastor, you've never pastored, like it's one of those things that you will never fully understand until it's something that you walk in. And I'm sure that as a pastor myself and as a preacher's kid, like we see the pastors go through certain things, but not often do we get to hold the conversation to hear it from their perspective. So I have a special guest tonight in the studio. I'm going to let him come on and introduce himself, and y'all give him a church rehab welcome. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Delighted to be on. Delighted to be on with you.
Awesome. If you will, yourself to our viewers.
I am Shamond Scales. I am a native of Clarksville, Tennessee. Um, and I am the husband of Brittany Scales. I have five beautiful children. Um, and I'm the pastor of Inspired Church. And that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. So, how did you end up in Jacksonville, Florida?
So I originally was pastoring, well, I've been pastoring as a senior pastor for since I was 21 years old. I've been pastoring. I pastored in a place called Jackson, Tennessee for almost 10 years. I moved back home, and I always want to give him credit and honor. Apostle Matthew Stevenson asked me a question one day, and I told my wife, I said, I'm never leaving Tennessee. I didn't, I am, I love home. I love home. I love the culture of home. So I told I'm never leaving. I'm never leaving Tennessee. And he asked me one day, he said, have you ever thought about moving to Florida? And I was like, no. But at that moment, something unusual came upon me at that moment, like, maybe there's something on that. And long story short, by faith, with little to nothing, me and my wife came and moved here, started ministry. I knew, and I say this jokingly, I knew two and a half people in Jacksonville, and that half was real. And to see what God has done in just a short amount of time has been amazing. And I really, really, there's no place like home. But I really, really love Jacksonville. I've become very fond of being here. So that's kind of the abbreviated story of how I got here to Jacksonville.
2.5 people. That's hilarious. I my son, did you know Chris Stevens was my son? Cause
Absolutely, he cuts my hair.
okay, yeah, cause many people for some reason they automatically connect me and Antonio and Victoria, but not
Mhm.
many people connect me and Chris.
Yes.
But prior to you coming, he had mentioned that a pastor was coming from Tennessee,
Mhm.
because he was there with the military. And so, not knowing who you were, he kept saying, he's coming, he's coming. And then when you came, I was like, oh, so that's the pastor he was talking about,
Yes. He
from.
actually used to play drums at my home church when he was living there, and actually was under my aunt, my aunt that passed. So that's me and his connection
Yeah, one thing about my kids, they gonna find somewhere
there.
to work in ministry. I don't care where they are, which is always so awing to me, considering we've not had the most pleasant experiences. But one of the things I always did, even when I walked away from church, like I literally would get up and drive them to church on a Sunday morning and be like, hey, when you're done, holler at me and I'll get you.
Got
So they've always been in church. So tell me about your childhood. Who was Shamond the child? Did I say it right?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Who was Shamond the child?
I'm not too much different from who I am now, actually. I started preaching when I was 10. Well, let's go before that. I was a church baby. And I play I tell people all the time, most most preachers, anything, you start off on the drums. I
Hmm.
played the drums at the church, and I was always very musically inclined, and felt the call on God on my life early. It was very evident, and I started ministry at about 10 years old. And so as a kid, it's all I've known. Church leadership, doing things is all I known. It was my house. I come from a single parent home. But me and my father had a great relationship. He's deceased now, but me and my father had a great relationship. He was just he did what he could. And so he was a traveling mortician, all of that. But I lived in the house with my grandparents, my mother, and my aunt. My grandfather was the chairman of the deacon board. My grandmother was the head mother. My mother was over the children's ministry, and my auntie was the minister of music. And then, even as time matriculated, my mom later in life became the co-pastor, assistant pastor of the church. My auntie was the elder. I would tell people all the time, I had to learn early in my life how to get over stuff quick, because if we would have an argument in the house, we had to get it together quick because my family ran the whole church. So if, if we was having a bad week, it was gonna be a rough Sunday. So I mean, everything was gonna be off. So I learned that quickly. I had not now above that. I early on in my childhood, and this is kind of very unique. I played sports. I'm a huge basketball fan. But when I got to high school, I tried to play basketball, and I couldn't play basketball because my schedule wouldn't allow me to play basketball, because literally my mother, um, halfway through my high school career, she didn't work because she was on the road traveling with me. So there would be mornings where I would preach a revival at night in Chicago and be on the first train smoking with a backpack on to be back at school at 7:15 in high school. So I didn't really have time to do that. But at the same time, I was in leadership all around. I was the president of the student body of my school. Every place I went, I just end up in charge. It was just kind of my life. So not too much different from what I'm doing now. I've been this way and doing this literally my whole life.
And it's funny, because Victoria says all the time that I remind her of you, or
Okay.
there are messages like on Sunday evening, she'll call and we'll have a conversation about what happened at my service, and then it'll end up being like literally parallel to
Wow.
the thing. So even in having an off camera conversation about our mothers being uh like my mama was on her way to church when she
Yeah,
went to labor
yeah,
because my dad was being ordained as deacon. Uh, so they had to drop my daddy off and then rush her to the emergency room.
wow,
So I literally I've been in church all
yeah,
my life, and that's how it was for me. Like I tell people all the time, the person I am now, this is who I've always been. Um, in church leadership, I tell people I've done everything in church from the pulpit to the toilet.
yeah,
Because when you are the preacher's kid, the leader of your parents' lead, you
yeah.
end up inadvertently learning how to do ministry,
That's
which is again, as you've seen, why my children are so fluent, because as we were on assignment, because me and their father, like a lot of our assignments was undergirding pastors. So
okay.
the Lord would send us to churches, and we are builders. So we would literally help to build the ministry,
Mhm,
which always put them in a position where Chris was always on the drums, AJ was always singing,
mhm.
Victoria was always dancing.
Wow.
So they literally have the way they are now, that's how we've always been. So do you feel that there are times that you missed out on being a child?
Great question. Yes, I actually have a story that was so like I said, I've always been in charge. So not only was I the president of the student body in high school, I was the president of the student body in middle school. And I remember a particular, it was the eighth grade prom. And there was this teacher that I had that she was apostolic, like hardcore. Uh, I remember one time her prophesying to me in the classroom in front of all the kids. She said, "There's a bishop anointed," like, and all the kids are looking at like, "Hey, what is she on?" But I can remember there being a service that I had to preach at the same night as the dance, and I told um I forgot her name, but I told the teacher in confidence, like, I have to preach, but I would like to. I think I would like to go to the dance, to the eighth grade prom. I was actually up for prom king, so I was just, I think I would like to go. And she said, "Well, you're a man of God. You know what you got to do." And I remember saying, like, I don't know, I don't know. So I made a choice out of guilt and went to church. And I remember years later thinking, as many times as I preached, I don't think that one night would have hurt. I thought about that. But I also thought about sometimes and I don't fault them, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
That it was hard, I think, and that's why I always give kudos to my mother, because she tried to normalize my life as best as she could. It was hard having a kid with that level of anointing, that level of gifting, that level of calling, and not only that, like traveling, that was a lot. And then try to make him normal, and I think that was, but the people around were always putting another type of pressure on me.
Mm,
And not my family so much, but I was so serious then about making sure I did things the right way, making sure that I, you know, lived according to how I needed to live. I didn't want to make a mistake. And I heard all these, you know, when you're a kid preacher, everybody wants you not to make the mistakes that they made. So they're extra hard on you, not knowing that I've got to make some mistakes so I can learn certain things for myself. I needed to, and I'm not necessarily talking about sin. There's just some things that I needed to hit my head about so I can, have some kind of testimony, or be able to, and that came later on in college and all of that. But it was a little rough. It was a little rough because there was so much I wanted to do, but I had this conviction, like, oh no, you're preaching. Another story, and I told this to, and this is weird. High school, there was like this huge basketball game, and I think it was something was supposed to go down that night, and the whole city knew it. And that night I said, I'm going to this game. I don't care. I don't think we had church that night, but I said, I'm going to this game. I want to be here. So this now only shows that the pressure that older people had, younger people used to put pressure on me too. I walked in the gym, and the head of the gang, one of the gangs in the city, God rest his soul, he passed. I believe he was murdered. He spotted me walking in, and he said, nope, he gets me, puts me in his car. Like, this is like the head gang member of the city. Puts me in his car, drives me home. And the whole time, now he's all the way in that life. The whole time he's driving me home, he's saying, listen, we need you. We need somebody that's standing up to, I can't have you out here. I can't have nothing happen to you. Like, you don't, and I appreciated it, but it also put another weight on me that's like, I can't even be, up here. I'm looked at like, man, everybody depending on me. So it was very rough. It was very rough. It was very rough.
Yes. Wow. So, at any point, was there like a level of resentment for your call because oftentimes there was not the space to just be normal?
Yes, there were moments that I said to myself, first of all, I joke sometimes that I've been preaching now for 23 years. And I say to myself sometimes, there's some people that just started at the age I'm at right now. Like, why couldn't I have had the opportunity to, it gives me an advantage now, but I've had moments where I'm like, God, you could have gave me time. You could have gave me, the Bible talks about, when we read the text about Jeremiah, it says, before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you and
Yes.
ordained you to prophet to the nation. What people, when you know the backstory of that, his father is a priest.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremiah's father is a priest. And by Levitical order, Jeremiah is going to be a priest anyway, because
Mm-hmm.
the way it worked then was, you were a priest because your daddy was a priest. You were in that Levitical order.
Right.
Even the priesthood lived in the same neighborhood. They all lived together. So when God was calling, when we read that scripture and don't understand the background, we assume that Jeremiah had a choice. No, he didn't have a choice. What his issue with God was, not right now. It wasn't that, it's not that I'm not going to say yes. I'm just not going, I just don't want to say yes right now. I know I got to do it, but let me get my fun out the way. Let me get everything out the way, and then I'll come. I had moments like that because I would watch people. You have to understand, pastoring in your early 20s, you're still growing as a
Mm-hmm.
person. You're still, so imagine pastoring people that are your age, and you have to live above their experiences when y'all at the same age should probably be experiencing the same thing. It was rough. And I had moments, even now, there are moments where I'm like, I wish that there was some life that I could have lived. Because I mean, God's been good to me, and it's pastoring is the job that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, but I never quit. It's I wouldn't wish it on anybody. If somebody told me, a young person came to me and said, uh, I've been called to preach, I would tell them two things. I would say,
Right.
congratulations, and I feel so sorry for you. it's it's a it's a duality. I would hug him and cry at the same time.
That's that two things are true at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yes. And so there were so many things. Okay, so I was born to really old parents.
Okay,
So my dad was 51 and my mama was 39. So all of my siblings, between me and my closest sibling is I have a brother that there's 9 years in between us. So by the time I was 9, he was 18. So even though I have I had because a few have passed 14 sisters and brothers, I was primarily raised as an only child because I'm the only child my mom and dad had together.
okay,
So I lived and experienced sheltered life. Like my dad, he tried as much as he could to normalize my life. My I've always been told, "Oh my God, you're so different." But my dad, it felt like my dad was the one person who understood that
okay,
difference. So, like the call and the hand of God on my life has always been apparent. The Lord has always dealt with me in dreams and visions, and um, since I was really young. So I remember having a conversation with the Lord, and this is how I talk to the Lord because we tight like that. So I remember asking the Lord, like, why did you not allow me to do some of the stuff that like I really wanted to do, or do some of the stuff that other people had an opportunity to do? I was like, they went out there, they was wilding, like
yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
was having fun, like they was doing all the stuff they going, Freaknik and all
Right.
this stuff like this. And I'm like, I ain't get to do nothing. And I remember the Lord said, because I shielded you from that.
Wow.
And I was like, I guess. But I really would have liked to have
Yeah, 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 yeah.
to experience some of that. And like I even as a child, like I remember being 11 and 12 years old, being the director of the Baptist convention, uh,
Okay,
always having to be in the forefront. Like I started singing at like 2, like I was 2 years old, standing in front of the podium singing and stuff like that. So I don't know a life that doesn't include church
uh-huh.
until I backslide in 2020. I'm sorry, in 2010.
Okay.
So, has there been a moment when you just decide that I am not going to do this church thing no more?
I wish I couldn't, but and the reason why I couldn't is because I was the pastor. Um, I so and that's real. I think that one of the things too, though, I believe that I've walked away a couple of times in my head,
Yes.
but um, I the way I was raised and the pastors that I was raised by, walking away from something um was just, oh, like, you don't do that. Now I will say this: I believe that there has to be some space. This is why I think that that there has to be normalized sabbaticals, if
Yeah.
you will, for leaders, um because there are some people that the reason why they go crazy in it is because they don't have the luxury of having a moment to step away
Yeah.
from what was going on. I can remember pastoring um, in in my 20s, and especially when I was living in Jackson, tired, wore out, just mentally not where I needed to be. But I had to keep the church together. I had to keep things together. And I think that the person that's more tormented is not just the person that backslides. I think the person that's the most tormented is the person that doesn't even have space to be human. I think that um sometimes the term backslide can be biblical, but the truth is, I think that sometimes when you've been doing it this long, your body and your brain just says, I need a moment. I really think that you just kind of run out of gas. The Bible says that Jesus told Peter that I prayed for you, that your faith fail not. And I
Yeah.
was saying that um if the destiny is the vehicle, that faith is the gas. And
Mm-hmm.
I was saying that Jesus was basically telling Peter, I'm gonna be praying for you, because he just told you, on this rock I build my church. Gates of
Yeah.
hell should not prevail against it. In other words, listen, upon your revelation, I'm building my church. Peter doesn't know that in the book of Acts, he's going to be the leader that
Yeah.
God is going to use on the day of Pentecost. Jesus is saying, Satan's coming for you. I'm praying that you don't run out of gas.
Mm.
And I think that a lot of times in ministry, we just run out of gas. And there's some people, and I think both of them are just as detrimental. There's some people that move away from it, but then there are some people that are mentally away from it and they're still in it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that there has to be space. I tell the people of my church all the time, especially because I'm pastoring younger people, and I know that I'm going to be a part of the development of their Christian experience as they get older. I tell them all the time, you're never offending me, letting me know that you need a moment to yourself. Don't ever think as a pastor that I'm just gonna lose my mind because you tell me, hey, I ain't got it. I don't have it in this season. I can't do it. Because what's gonna happen is, if I put too much pressure on you to feel that, there's gonna be one Sunday that I don't see you and I don't see you no more,
Mm-hmm.
because you know, or I want to leave space open that we can have a conversation of, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm feeling. And then sometimes as pastors and leaders, we don't really have somebody to have that conversation with, because we're the ones that everybody's having a conversation with. So we don't get a chance to tell somebody, hey, listen, I'm wore out, I'm tired, I feel like I want to do something else besides this. Like, there's not a lot of comfortable spaces to tell somebody. Like, as a pastor, how was I going to tell somebody, hey, I don't want to really want to do this right now. I don't want to do this anymore. They'll be like, what? What do you mean? And it's because they're depending on my word. So I think that there has to be some kind of safe space that's created amongst people, even pastors. Find you somebody, and I'm not condoning, but if you just gotta cuss and go crazy, just get it out. Find somebody that's like, okay, I hear you, I understand, let's work through this. Because that's why you got so many people doing it in the pulpit. They cussing everybody out. The saints are tired. The saints are stressed out.
And
Stressed
the funny thing is, it's like, so, as becoming a life coach, like having been on both sides, like I have,
out.
like I understand the plight.
Yes.
Like I get it. And so when it comes to like the level of people I coach, like because I was such a young leader, like I've become the leader of leaders.
Okay. Yes.
So I have become the one that pour into those who pour into others.
Right.
Like I coach executives, business owners,
Got you.
pastors, apostles, prophets, because no one has created that safe space for them.
Absolutely.
And the safe space that's needed has to have not just the ability to allow them to speak, but the ability to also feel it.
So,
Because even Jesus, the Bible says he's the high priest who could be touched by our infirmities.
yeah.
See, Like he get it. And when you go and you're sharing, like you got to be able to share in a safe space that gets it. I
Hmm.
I am your host, Pastor Michelle Kennedy with Embrace You Ministries. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and remember it's your time to fly.